Good evening and welcome back. I'm Britt Hume, and this is On the Record. Attention is now shifting from last night's vice presidential debate to Sunday's second debate between the two presidential candidates. The national polling average, meanwhile, continues to show Hillary Clinton with just under a 4-point lead in a two-way race and a similar margin in a four-way. The betting odds continue to show her a heavy favorite by roughly 3-1. There has been some movement in the polls in Florida, a state Donald Trump basically has to win and where he had been narrowly ahead as recently as 2 weeks ago. But now the race seems to have shifted. For more on that key state, we turn to the pollster and columnist of the Washington Examiner, Kristen Soltis Anderson. Hi, Kristen. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
So what are you seeing in Florida?
Florida is a state that Donald Trump needs because it's 29 electoral votes. He needs to make up 64 votes over what Mitt Romney won 4 years ago. That's got to be a big piece of the puzzle.
Yeah,
and you're right.
Mitt Romney did not win Florida, right?
Mitt Romney did not win Florida, but it was by a very close margin. And so Donald Trump needs to improve across all sorts of types of voter groups in order to try to overcome that and take that big prize. But right now, Donald Trump is struggling amongst important groups like women and including the Latino population, which is a pretty big part of winning Florida, where Donald Trump continues to struggle.
Well, Republicans used to do reasonably well with the Latino vote because they got such a heavy margin out of the very large Cuban population in the Miami area. Has that changed?
It's changed a little bit. So the Cuban population...
Look at this poll on the screen. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Kristen. I don't know if you could see this, but you can see the Hispanic voters are heavily for Hillary Clinton. I don't guess he has any hope of winning them, but I suppose he could cut into that margin that would make a big difference.
You're right. So Mitt Romney won 39% of Latino voters in Florida 4 years ago. So Donald Trump's about 9 points behind. Part of that, as you mentioned, is the composition of the Latino vote in Florida has changed. So Cuban Americans tend to lean further to the right, more conservative. It's an important part of the Republican vote in that state. And they make up a little over a third of all Hispanic voters in Florida. But their numbers have been shrinking as a part of the overall pie because of the growth of the Puerto Rican community in Orlando, where I'm from. Large numbers of folks are coming over from the Puerto Rican community into Orlando. And right now, only 17% of Puerto Rican Hispanics in Florida are voting for Donald Trump. So he's really got to boost his numbers, particularly amongst Latinos in the center of the state.
Is there any clear reason why he does so poorly with the Puerto Rican immigrant vote?
Well, in part, I think the Puerto Rican vote is more like your traditional Latino vote. Part of the reason why the Cuban American vote has leaned further to the right is, again, because of their sort of experience with communism coming over from Cuba.
On the screen there, man.
Yeah.
That's staggering.
These are numbers that Donald Trump really needs to address if he wants to have a fighting shot in Florida. And bear in mind, Florida's not the only state where he's got to do better among the Latino vote in order to have a real chance. You've got states like Colorado that had seemed like they might be swinging back closer into potentially being gettable for Trump. If numbers like this persist, they really won't be. A state like Arizona is supposed to be a pretty solidly Republican state, but some polls have cast some doubt on that as of the last few weeks.
And this is all about the Latino vote in your judgment?
I think it's pretty seriously about the Latino vote. Donald Trump does very well among white voters, but in many of these states, the composition of who votes in that state has been changing. And so Donald Trump can't just run up the numbers with the white vote if he wants to succeed.
In the meantime, in Florida, it appears that Marco Rubio, who was rejected by the Republican electorate in Florida as a presidential nominee, overwhelmingly, Trump won big, is doing fine, right?
You're right. So Marco Rubio is ahead amongst Latino voters in Florida, despite the fact that Donald Trump is down by about 24 points, or thereabouts, as you showed in that earlier poll. So, you know, a lot of these states, you see the Republican Senate candidates are running ahead of where Donald Trump is running. But here, part of Marco Rubio's strength really is that he has much more of a base amongst that Miami Hispanic community, much stronger running with the Cuban vote.
Right?
Mm-hmm. Very much so.
So is there anything that Trump obviously could do to bolster his support there?
Well, the immigration issue is one that folks always talk about when it comes to the Hispanic vote. And clearly Trump has sort of struggled to make the connection on that front. I think one argument that I've heard Trump make at some points that could have an opportunity is he talks about the importance of making sure that folks who go through the legal process are sort of given that priority, given that fair shot. That lots of folks in a place like Florida do know lots of folks that have had to pay a lot in legal fees to go through the legal process to become U.S. citizens. That's one potential opportunity. I think the strongest message, though...
because people already in the state think the legal process is the way to go and they may resent illegals.
I've heard that in focus groups before from Latino voters, that while on the one hand they want to see reform of the system and they don't want to see illegal immigrants demonized, they do want to make sure that the system is fair, and they've seen folks who have had to make great sacrifices to go through the system legally. But the other strong issue that Trump has, again, is the economy. This is the #1 issue across demographic groups.
Right.
And it's the issue where he consistently polls the closest to Hillary Clinton when you ask, who do you trust more? I think if he gets back to focusing on that issue, that's probably the best shot he's got.
Kristen, thanks very much.
Thanks, Britt.
If there's one state where Donald Trump's hopes of rewriting the electoral map may come true, it has been Ohio, where he continues to lead in the RCP polling average by about 2.5 points. He leads in every poll in that average except one, that being a fresh poll from Monmouth University showing Mrs. Clinton leading by 2 points. So is this poll just an outlier, or have things begun to change in her favor out there? For the answer, we turn to Julie Carr-Smythe of the Associated Press Bureau in Columbus. Hi, Julie. Thank you very much for coming on.
Hello, Britt. Thanks for having me.
What do you make of the Monmouth poll? Does it look like it's showing a real trend, or what?
Well, I think it's probably a little too soon to say. I do think it's a pretty important poll for Hillary Clinton here, coming right off of a whole bunch of stories that we're talking about how she had abandoned the state, was shifting a lot of her money out of Ohio, which made it look a lot like she was giving up. However, she did return to the state on Monday, and Bill Clinton has been in the state today and yesterday, especially aiming toward coal country, which has been a strong area for Donald Trump thus far, where we're seeing old trends really fall away out there in Appalachia, and most of those counties going for Trump.
What do you say? The trend had been in those areas. That's what those had been blue areas, hadn't they?
Right. Those areas have tended to be blue, and in this poll, it looks as if Hillary Clinton is very strong still in the northeast part of the state, but she's still close to 10 points behind where Obama was at this point in the last couple of elections. And Democrats really need to do really well in those urban areas, heavily Democratic areas in Cleveland, Toledo, and then down through Appalachia. So it's been a huge fight there because the coal jobs are going away. Trump has capitalized, as has Senate candidate Rob Portman, on some of Hillary Clinton's comments that sounded as if they were against coal miners, and that area seems to be in swing.
Speaking of Portman, he was one of those I think Democrats had on their list of people who could be beaten, the incumbent Republican senator. The polling out there, we're looking at a poll there now, shows him up 15, and that same poll that showed Hillary Clinton up. I thought that was pretty striking. Does that suggest to you that whatever happens in the presidential level, that the demographics and the political coloration of the state of Ohio has really quite changed?
I think we're always a divided state, and I think some of this relates to the campaign that Rob Portman has run. He's run a really well-funded sort of campaign where he's taken on our former governor, Ted Strickland, in terms of Strickland's record. Strickland had governed during the recession, and many jobs were lost, and that has just been hammered in ads by outside groups as well as by Portman. So Strickland has really taken a beating with these ads, and it's begun to show. And so I think that there may be a lot of split-ticket voting this year. If Portman is also not, he has endorsed Trump, but he's tried to stick away from Trump so that he can kind of have it both ways. And Strickland has not really managed to make that stick on Portman, that he's distancing himself from Trump.
Thank you very much. It's good to have you on, Julie.